All right, and we're back with the show once again. It's Gerald coming right back at you here. It is NBA playoff time. Once again, our favorite time of the year for basketball fans. And to break it down with me once again is our NBA man in the know. It is Anthony Barbarin. Anthony, it's just always great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, again. As long as we're not talking Lakers, we already got that out of the way. I'm just telling you right now, no more Lakers, no more Lakers. La 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 la. Don't want to listen. It's like Avengers Endgame secrets. I don't want to hear this. No. Don't want to hear that. But right now, yeah, don't get me started on the Lakers. But anyways, it is the NBA playoffs right now. You must be a happy man for at least a little while when it comes to your favorite team, the Los Angeles Clippers. But we'll go there in a second. We're going to start off with the Eastern Conference, a real quick breakdown of each conference. When it comes to the Eastern Conference, there's a lot of teams that are not quite there yet. The bottom half of the bracket is still not quite, I guess, at the level, let's say, some of the bottom teams on the Western Conference, but still there should be some intriguing matchups. And I'm going to start first with you, my friend, on the Bucks Detroit Pistons matchup, the 1-8 matchup. The Bucks coming off of a 60-win season, surpassing all expectations. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who we'll talk about here later about if he is or if he's not MVP. So don't hold off on that just now. But Giannis Antetokounmpo and the three-point shooting that Milwaukee Bucks have had, I just see it as too much overcoming Detroit. And, at this point in time, I see them going ahead and beating Detroit in 4 games.
I kind of agree with you. I think Detroit might be able to get a game. If Blake's healthy, there's some speculation that he might not even be healthy for game 1. So I think if that's the case, and they start on this beaten path where they're blown out in the first game, I definitely think it could end up in a sweep. I hope Blake's healthy because I think it was Mark Stein say he thinks Blake was probably the second best player in the Eastern Conference this year. I would drop him down to maybe the 4th best, but
I would say 5th personally. But yeah, it's not that high.
I think he was, to me, I understand the climate of the teams and the success of the teams, but I thought he was better than Kyrie this year. I thought he was better than some of these other players that But you got Joel Embiid in there, so I don't think he was better than Joel Embiid. I don't think he was. I think you could throw Kawhi in there, even though he missed a couple games. So I would probably drop him to 4th. But I mean, I think what he's averaging 24, 8, and 5. If that's, I think because he's a power forward, people kind of question he's only getting 7.5, 8 rebounds. But if you put that on a small forward, then you'd be talking about him in top 5 players in the game. So I think he's had an amazing season. And I think in the playoffs, a duel between him and Giannis game in and game out, I think would have been really good. But if he's not healthy, I just think Milwaukee's too much. And even if he is, I've always questioned the construction of the Detroit Pistons roster. I don't think on the perimeter they have enough at the wing spots. I just think they're, plug and play and filling holes with putty. So I think Milwaukee is going to be too much for them. And 5 games at the most. And I think Milwaukee's got it.
Yeah, like I said, I don't even give them the chance to get one. I think, like you said, if they get a blowout early, that's all she wrote in that first game. I think that's just going to be a demotivator right there for you. The next matchup we'll talk about is the 4-5 matchup with the Boston Celtics versus the Indiana Pacers. Boston, I believe, for many, like many out there, they have underachieved this year, and I think because there's so much more expectations out of them being something similar with the talent that they have on the roster, probably even being in the number 1 spot and facing off against whoever in the Western Conference in the finals. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. It was kind of, like I said, a disappointing season, but they're in the playoffs now. They can go ahead and have that deep roster that they can still utilize. It's against a team in Indiana that was so strong coming out of the gate, but unfortunately, due to the season-ending injury to Victor Oladipo, it looks like to me, I'm going to say the Celtics in no more than I don't think it's going to go 7. I think it's also going to go another 5 games.
I kind of agree with you, but I think Indiana's tough enough to push it to 6. I have my issues with Boston, and it's an internal struggle with them. I think you got the young players from last year that think we don't need you when you talk about Kyrie and they talk about Gordon Hayward, but those guys are the starters and those guys are the big money guys. And you also have those guys who want to prove that they're the missing link. And had they had them last year, we would have done this. So I think there might be a bit of internal things there. And I think that's what's been there through most of the season. I think their talent has gotten them to where they are. So I think Indiana's grit will give them at least 1 game, maybe 2. But I think Boston is just too talented. There's too much talent up and down that roster. Brad Stevens, in my opinion, is too good of a coach for them to lose. So I think they'll get out of the first round. I do think, though, that that's probably the most intriguing first round matchup in the Eastern Conference.
Because there's also other matchups that are there, but do you think that's the most intriguing? I think the next matchup to me is the most intriguing, and that is the Brooklyn Nets versus the Philadelphia 76ers, especially if Joel Embiid is hurt and either doesn't return or doesn't return at 100% right away. I think that makes it much more competitive, especially because Coach Kenny Atkinson really drives his team hard, and they really, really work hard for him. I see this as going another 6-game series. I don't see it going 7. If Embiid's hurt, it may go 7, but I'm going to see right now Philly winning on the road in 6 games. It'll probably be, in my opinion, the toughest, but also, like you said, Boston, Indiana, I see that, like I said, it was 5 games, but I don't think they're going to be blowouts in any type of situation. I think they'll all be close games in the Boston, Indiana series, but I do see in this series, I think if Embiid is hurt or is not going into it 100%, I see a 6-game really just drawn out, big fight between the 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets.
If Embiid is not healthy, that changes everything. If he's there and he's good enough, healthy enough to play his regular minutes at a top level, maybe not 100%. I just think there'll be too much. To me, I think Philadelphia has the best roster in the Eastern Conference. I think they don't know each other well enough yet, and I think that's why there's been some slippage. They both of their wing players are middle season acquisitions, and so they've been trying to learn each other on the fly. But to me, they're just too talented. If Embiid is there and if Embiid is healthy, if he's 100% healthy, I could see it being a sweep. I like Brooklyn and I like what they've done and I like, the story that they are, but I don't think they're at close to the level that Philadelphia is with their players and who they have on that team. Like you said, they've made the playoff for the first time in years. Whereas Philadelphia was in the playoffs last year. They learned from it last year. I think they learned from those fourth quarter, crunch time meltdowns, which cost them against Boston. And I think they're going to have an attitude, especially with Jimmy Butler, to that dog kind of mentality. And I think they're going to, especially if Embiid is not healthy, I think that can force a bit of urgency with Philadelphia to get Brooklyn out early so that he can rest and be healthy for the later run into the postseason.
And then you have, well, like I said, I agree with you. If Embiid's healthy, it's a sweep or close to it. But without him, it's going to be a bigger struggle for the 76ers. And but I still think they're going to make it out of the first round with not too many issues. But I think of the series that are going to be there, if Embiid's not healthy or he's not playing, it's going to make it much more competitive than any of the other first round series in the Eastern Conference, which leads us to the last series that's going to be available, which is the Orlando Magic facing off against the Toronto Raptors. Kawhi's had a lot of rest, my friend. So I don't see there being a problem with him going into the playoffs now. He's gotten a pretty cake schedule. He should be sharp enough along with the rest of his teammates. I see this as a 5 games maybe at best, possibly even a 4-game sweep by the Toronto Raptors.
I agree. I don't see it being a 5-game. I think Toronto is going to sweep Orlando. I think there's even Kawhi's the new guy, so is Danny Green. But I also think, and it's crazy how, as NBA, we talk about this guy even when he's not there. The LeBron factor of he's out of the way, he's gone, lights up for Toronto, because a lot of those players played against him last year, and the fan base and the organization has been stopped by him in multiple seasons. And this is, you feel like the path has been cleared. And so I think there's going, just like with Philadelphia, a sense of urgency to knock some of these guys out without middling around, without playing, without having any real mental lapse for games. So I think it's a nice story again for Orlando to make it, but I think they're out in 4 games.
I agree with you. It's going to be pretty easy for the Toronto Raptors, and also the Orlando Magic. A great story. They had a really nice season as far as a bounce back season. Their outlook going forward with some nice young talent looks really good, but not the season for the Orlando Magic. Which brings us down to who is going to go ahead in the semifinals for the Eastern Conference, and you have the Toronto Raptors playing off against. They're going to be playing against the 76ers, and then you have the Boston Celtics versus Milwaukee. Your choices on both those matchups. I'm going to go ahead and say at this point in time, I'm going to go with Toronto sneaking out over the 76ers. I just don't think that chemistry is there with the 76ers, even though they have the best front 5 in the Eastern Conference. I think they're going to pull that one out in 7 games. Plus, I think in the do we want to go ahead with a surprise in the Eastern Conference when it comes to the Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks in a rematch from last year's playoffs? I'm not willing to pull the gun on that, because I also think there are also some chemistry issues there. I think it's also going to be a 7-game series with Milwaukee coming out on top and leading into an Eastern Conference matchup, which is going to have, and I think you were talking about it best, I think Toronto is going to be the Eastern Conference representative in the NBA Finals, because of those two, I think they play the better defense, even though statistically, I know Milwaukee matches up very well defensively. I still think Antetokounmpo versus Kawhi Leonard is just a matchup. They're so good, they're gonna cancel each other out. So it leaves a lot of the rest of the individuals there, and I think Pascal Siakam and the rest of the individuals on there, on the Toronto Raptors are just going to prove out to be too much. I think the 3-point shooting on there that is so reliant by Milwaukee at some point may not be there for them. So, and if that's the case, to me, I think at this point in time, going into the Eastern Conference Finals and being able to be victorious on that, it's going to be the Toronto Raptors.
I completely legitimate. For me, I think.
Well, it's pretty much a toss-up between those 4 teams.
Yeah, I think those 4 teams are. I don't think it's surprising if any of those 4 teams make it to the finals. For me, I have Philadelphia actually coming out of the semis. I like Toronto. I like what they present with their bench, the way they play. To me, Philadelphia has too many capable star players. They have too many guys who can go, this guy's not on, this guy's not on, I'm going to take it over. And so I think Philadelphia in 7 will pass Toronto. I think the Milwaukee and Boston series again is that's a tough one because I do think I feel the same way about Boston as opposed to Milwaukee. They have more guys who can take games over. I think they're going to miss Marcus Smart. If Marcus Smart is not there, that the toughness that he brings an attitude shift to that team.
Plus, he could guard a Antetokounmpo almost like no one else can.
Right, and yeah, he just brings something to that team, kind of like a Draymond Green, where it's not that they're so talented; it's just what they provide from an intensity standpoint. Really, really helps, and that could be a detriment to them. I think Milwaukee. I think that's a 7-game series. I think it's a 7-game series. It's kind of a toss-up. I'm going to go with Milwaukee just because of the Marcus Smart problem and the chemistry issues. I think Milwaukee will be able to pull it out, and I think they'll meet Philadelphia in the conference finals. And I got Philadelphia pulling it out again. I just think they have too much. I think their chemistry issues can be solved through this run. Out of the first round, into the second round, I think they can learn, even if in not how to play in seasons going forward, and how to play right now with each other, and how to win right now with each other. I think that Philadelphia has the best roster. I think they have. When they play together, when they're on, they're a team that can score, that can defend. I just think they can share the ball, and they have multiple stars that can take over a game. And even with Milwaukee, I mean, once if it's not Antetokounmpo, then who is it? So I think Philadelphia is the team that gets into the NBA Finals against the Western Conference.
You've got Philadelphia. I've got Toronto going in the Eastern Conference. But does it really matter when it comes to whoever we have in the Eastern Conference? Because there's the Western Conference we need to talk about, my friend. And I have a feeling our paths are going to be ending up in the same fashion as far as the team is concerned. And we're going to start off with the team I think we both have in mind when it comes to the Golden State Warriors playing your Clippers. And the question I want to ask you is, I've got them in a sweep, but do you have them actually winning out a game at the Staples Center for the Los Angeles Clippers?
I do not.
And you know what? And that's I appreciate your honesty on that, especially someone who's a big fan of the Clippers on that. I've got props for you, my friend, on that.
Yeah, I did, and this was my initial throughout the season. I did not want the Clippers to make the playoffs. I know that sounds horrible.
Well, no, it's not horrible because they also had a draft pick in mind as well.
And they lost that draft pick to Boston because they made the playoffs. Also, this was my issue. I did not want to scave into the AFC to only play Golden State and get swept. If we could have, as the Clippers could have gotten to for most of the end of the season, they were in the 5th seed, 6th seed. So to me, those are chances that you actually have to do something. If you would have gotten to the 6th, you would have played Portland. I thought they had a great chance against Portland. But against Golden State, you essentially you lose a draft pick, you take yourself out of the Zion sweepstakes, and you get swept in 4. So for me, I think it is a bit positive when you go, okay, we've shown we can make the playoffs with these guys when you talk about signing free agents next year. So there's a positive there. But I don't think they have a chance against Golden State unless Steph Curry's ankle acts up, and even then, maybe a game. So if Golden State is fully healthy, it's a sweep, and not only a sweep, I think the games are blowouts. I don't think they have enough to contend with Golden State.
I agree with you 100% on that. And I think we're going to be agreeing on Golden State for a couple more times more coming up here in a minute. But the matchup next is very intriguing between the Houston Rockets and the Utah Jazz, or should I say the Houston James Harden and everybody else, because the offense has become so focused around him. I am going to go ahead and even with the Jazz defense, I'm going to say Houston in 7, but it's not going to be easy. Let me ask you this when it comes to not only the series, your thoughts on the series, but overall in the playoffs. Do you think so much of a central focused type offense when it comes to James Harden, as everybody has talked about so far this season, is going to be able to work out in the playoffs? Or do you need something more as far as a more diversified offense and a more team friendly type deal to go ahead and advance even more than what they did in last year's playoffs?
I think they need to play the way they played last year. I think they need to kind of teeter back and forth between he and he and Chris Paul having the ball, because the way James Harden is playing now is how he's played in seasons past before Chris Paul got there. And I think those were the reasons for his struggles in the playoffs. Because when you have the ball, and I've said this, when you're playing somebody on a back-to-back, when you're playing somebody flying in after you just had a game or you were out partying, that's very difficult to game plan for when you got 82 games. But when you're talking about a series and you have a central focus of one team that we're focusing on, all their flaws, all their positives, what they do well, what they do consistently, when you lock into that, then you can kind of come up with a game plan against that team. So when you play a team like the Rockets and James Harden has the ball in his hands constantly, you can focus in on him and playing the way they play off of him, as well as they don't call fouls the same way in the playoffs as they do in the regular season. So I think the Rockets, I think they'll beat Utah. I think they're too talented to beat for Utah to beat, because I also feel that Utah kind of plays similarly, even though, Donovan Mitchell is not the passer that James Harden is. He's their central offensive focus. They put the ball in his hands, and that's how they kind of operate offensively. But the Rockets, with their shooters, with their ability to say, here, Chris Paul, now we're going to give you the ball and let you do something and let you facilitate and let you run the offense, and James Harden can still play off of that. I just think they're going to be too much for Utah. I got Houston in 6. But going forward, I think that the Rockets are going to have to not forcibly adjust what they're doing, but be open to the possibility of in-game changing their offensive philosophy.
Like I said, it's just a matter of when it comes to the James Harden centric offense doesn't produce the way it needs to. It's not a question of how or whatnot. It's just a question of when. And I think, like you said, it's going to be in that coming after the first round tough matchup against Utah. I don't think it's going to be able to last much longer. Like you said, last year's offense was a lot better, but then again, it was all about missing 27 straight threes. I think that was the difference. Unfortunately, that might be the closest they get for at least some time to the NBA Finals. The next matchup we've got is Portland versus Oklahoma City. I see a little bit of an upset here because Yusuf Nurkic has unfortunately gone after a gruesome leg injury. I think at this point in time, that's going to be the difference, because Enes Kanter is so good on the offensive and rebounding end, but is not going to be able to play the defense like I think you need to in the playoffs and be able to step it up on that side of the ball. I see that as the key. Plus, the wings and the forwards for Portland don't inspire much confidence in me as well. I do see a great matchup between the backcourts of Paul George and Russell Westbrook versus CJ McCollum, and also as well Damian Lillard. But I think at this point in time, I'm going to have to give the edge to Oklahoma City. They both play very good team ball. Oklahoma City is really good on the defensive end. If Russell Westbrook doesn't go crazy as far as with the shooting, because he's really experienced some woes shooting this year, and make sure to go ahead and put Paul George in a good place as far as his play. I really think you're going to see Oklahoma City battle out and actually overcome the Portland Trailblazers in 6 games.
Yeah, I have Oklahoma City in 6 as well. I think this is why you bring in a Paul George. This is why you keep a Paul George. He's a star player. Russell Westbrook is a star player. And you need to have guys who it's great when you have a great team that plays well together. But there are times in games, it's not just the fourth quarter. There are times in games where you need star players to be star players. You need them to hit tough shots. You need them to go on certain offensive runs. With a Paul George, you have a guy who you can go guard him. I need you to make sure he does nothing. So you got guys like, they'll play Damian Lillard, and Damian Lillard, I think, is one of the most underrated players in the game. And so I don't think he's a guy you can stop, but I think you can put a Paul George on a CJ McCollum, and you put the pressure on Damian Lillard to have to score 40 a night. That's the kind of thing you can do with a Paul George. And with that team defensively, period. I think Oklahoma City, and I think Russell Westbrook will elevate his game. Not as far as just stats. I think efficiency-wise, he'll elevate his game a bit. It may not be in leaps and bounds, but it'll be enough to be significant for Oklahoma City. Because to me, he's one of those zone guys. He's one of those fiery, focused guys. And I think he'll get into that mode for the playoffs. And it'll be too much for Portland. I think Oklahoma City in 6.
I agree with you 100%. I just think, he will increase his efficiency, and he has to, in order for Oklahoma City to even get out of the first round. The last matchup is going to be very intriguing. It's the Denver Nuggets, who had an outstanding season. At times were the top team in the Western Conference, but still finished number 2. Got a very strong roster, very quality depth up and down the roster, matching up against Greg Popovich, the mastermind himself, and the San Antonio Spurs. This one's kind of tough to as far as gauge, because you have a team that's not as experienced in the playoff run going up against a guy who's already won championships as a coach and has a team that has a lot of experience backing him up. My opinion, I just don't think there's enough horses that are available in this whole type of team. I don't think there's enough good players on the San Antonio roster to get them over the hump, no matter how good the coaching is. I think at this point in time, it's going to go 7, and I'm going to give it to Denver. But I want to hear your thoughts, my friend. What do you think is going to happen between Denver and San Antonio?
I'm with you, man, because you can never count out a Greg Popovich team. He's probably the best, if not the second best coach we've ever seen. And he can get things out of players that you didn't think they had. Even in his system, guys, go away from his system and they don't play well. They come back and they play well. Greg, I think the Spurs have a good chance in this series, and I think it's literally a toss-up. I know Denver's played really well, but I'm always skeptical on Denver in the postseason because of the advantage that they have in the regular season. When teams go, a lot of times they play back-to-backs. They play, third game in 4 nights, and you're in Denver and at high altitude, and they just run you out of the building, and that accounts for a lot of their wins. I think Jokic is a great player, and I think they play off of him well. So I think that bodes well for them in the playoffs, because he's a guy you can go to on the block. He's a guy that can facilitate. He can score. You have the wings. So I think it's a great matchup. I think it's a long series. And I honestly don't know who to choose. This is really difficult. I'm going to just flip a coin, and I'm going to go with San Antonio, because of Greg Popovich. And another player who I think will raise their game is DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan, to me, always played pretty well in the playoffs. His running mate never did a whole lot, a lot of the times, and Kyle Lowry when he was in Toronto. But I think that DeMar DeRozan can elevate his game and be, if he was the best player in that series, I wouldn't be shocked. So I think a player like that, I'm always more inclined to wing players being the best player on the floor, because they can do a bit of both of what big men can do and what, point guards can do, the way they can control a game. So I mean, their game, their records are a 5-game difference, which for me is not a huge disparity. So I'm going to say with Greg Popovich, I'm going to give the San Antonio Spurs the upper hand in that series.
So that leads us into our picks up into the Western Conference Finals. For me, it starts off with Golden State and Houston. I think that's going to be a barn burner of a series, but I think ultimately Golden State is going to have enough for the series to take it. I think I'm going to say in 6 games, whereas in the next round you have Oklahoma City picked by both of us going up against either the Spurs or the Nuggets. I picked the Nuggets, you picked the Spurs. I'm going to go ahead and say, for me, the Nuggets versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm going to probably have to say Oklahoma City. I'm going to give them a surprise and give them a chance to go ahead, at least be able to be efficient enough to go ahead, at least get by the Denver Nuggets. I see that one going in 6 games as well, leading into a matchup versus Oklahoma City versus Golden State. I don't think Oklahoma City will be able to match up. I think their luck stops there, and I see Golden State heading into the finals in 5 games. Your thoughts on how the rest of the Western Conference will match up as far as who gets into the Western Conference Finals? But I have a feeling it's going to be similar, even though we had a couple differences. It's going to be similar as how it ends up.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much spot on. I think Houston and Golden State, I have Golden State in 6. I think the addition of DeMarcus Cousins on the offensive end, what you can do slowing the ball down and throwing the ball to him on the block, negates the deficiencies that they had last year offensively. And I just think there'll be too much for Houston. So I got Golden State in 6. I got Oklahoma City in a 7-game series with San Antonio. And I think Oklahoma City pulls it out. Golden State, to me, beats Oklahoma City in 5 or 6. If it went 6, I wouldn't be surprised. There's no way it's going 7. Like I said, you have 2 superstar players in Paul George and Russell Westbrook, who I think can both have monster games. The kind of games that can get you a game, but I don't see more than 1 each in a series for them against Golden State. So if they won 2, that to me will be a good series for them. But I don't think they have the necessary firepower to beat a Golden State. So I think Golden State is the team we'll see going up against Philadelphia. My pick of Philadelphia in the NBA championship.
And mine is Toronto, but it doesn't matter. I don't think either which way. I think it could be any team against Golden State. I still think there's 1 good year left for Golden State to go all the way. I see Golden State defeating Toronto personally. I see them defeating them I'm going to give it another 5 games. I don't think it's going to even go 6 or 7. I think Toronto's just going to be happy to be there. The city of Toronto is going to be excited and amped up. This is their first chance to be in a finals. And I think that euphoria is going to wear off the first time Steph Curry hits some threes on them. And there's going to be so many threes that are there that's just, going to be too much for Toronto. I think Kawhi is a great player, but he's not going to be able to guard everybody. He's not going to have the same type of effect that he did in that series that he was a part of the San Antonio Spurs against Golden State, where he was actually better than anybody else until he got hurt, and that pretty much caused a slide for Golden State. I think Golden State's going to take it very seriously and be able to overcome them in 5 games.
Yeah, I have Philadelphia against Golden State, and I think Philadelphia matches up better than, to me, up and down their roster, anybody else in the league. Houston probably is the second closest just because of the way they can score. But I think Philadelphia is a team that Golden State actually has to worry about, because up and down that roster, at least their starting 5. You have to worry about everybody on that roster, even though you can sink back and sink in the lane on a Ben Simmons. To me, you can do the same thing on the other end to a Draymond Green. But I think they match up well up and down the roster. But Golden State's been there. I think up and down the roster, they are more talented. And so they know how to play well together. I think Golden State in 6 against Philadelphia in the NBA Finals, and they win their 3rd in a row before Kevin Durant sets off into the sunset to try to get his own.
Exactly. And then there's drama possibly if they don't re-sign Klay Thompson to a nice contract, and DeMarcus Cousins gets his championship before he goes and gets a nice fat free agent contract. Right. Yeah, it's just going to be one last time, I think, going around for Golden State. We'll have to see next year.
Yeah, I think one last run. I think they'll do something in the offseason after Durant leaves, though, that shocks people. I think they'll sign Klay Thompson to his deal, and I think they'll do something to keep themselves very high in the rankings as far as contending for a championship. But their dominant reign, I think, is done after this season. So
I agree with you. I have a feeling they'll do something, but will it be enough? We'll have to wait and see.
Right.
But there's a couple other questions I want to ask you before we head on out, my friend. Real quick, MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo or James Harden? I think on both ends, Giannis Antetokounmpo was truly outstanding, and obviously a 60-win team, him being the major key component of that. Just too much Giannis. All respect to James Harden and what he did, playing the most unattractive but effective basketball I've ever seen as far as from an NBA standpoint. But it is really hard to watch sometimes. I'm just going to tell you that, my friend, honestly. But yes, Giannis Antetokounmpo is the MVP and should be the MVP because he does it on both ends, a dominating defensive player and also someone who is very scary on the offensive end.
I agree with you on the James Harden hard to watch. It's not just this year. It's been that way for me for years.
But it's extra hard this year.
He is a great player. And I think it's a toss-up, to be honest. And the reason I say that is because Giannis has been tremendous, but they haven't had the obstacles that Houston has had. And for me, the switch of James Harden's play in the face of those obstacles, the injuries that they endured, the injuries that he endured and had to come back from, and then his second best player going out for a stretch of period, and he changing his game or just his style of play to dominate the ball and to bring his team from where they weren't even in the playoffs early in the season to, being where they are now. I think he's averaging 36 points a game. He's still averaging, I believe, 8 assists. I would have to give it, if it was up to me, it's a coin flip. If Giannis won it, I'd be like, yeah, he deserved it. If it's up to me, I say just by a hair, I would go with James Harden just because of him doing this and having to do this for his team to be what they are. So to me, I would slightly go James Harden, but like you said, Giannis has been great up and down the roster. I mean, up and down on both sides of the court, offensively, defensively. But I think another guy who has been kind of similar to him, who hasn't gotten The pub, I would say probably throw in as my third in MVP is Embiid. I think Embiid has been great this year. I think it's been understated. If you look at his numbers, he's pretty close to Antetokounmpo in a lot of areas, not passing the ball, but rebounding, scoring, block shots. He's been dominant in certain games where you go, wow, if he stays healthy and he's on, there's nothing you can do. He will be the third in my MVP voting, but I would slightly edge it to James Harden.
Hey, not a problem. I can see why. I mean, he is to that team the most valuable player, and if you took him off that roster as opposed to Antetokounmpo off Milwaukee's roster right now, you're right. Houston would probably be more devastated by it. But it's just so, you watch it's funny because if you watched a Golden State game and you see that free flowing passing and the 3-point shooting that just works so beautifully when it's clicking, when it's on. And then you watch the next game after it and you would see Houston and James Harden handling the ball, dribbling the ball for 23 and a half seconds before finally a decision is made. It's hard sometimes to watch it, especially someone who just enjoys the game so much and loves to see the free flowing passing of a team type concept. But you know what? There's no doubt that both are very well qualified as players. But you've got James Harden, I've got Giannis. It's going to be a close vote either which way, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Right. But last thing, go ahead.
Antetokounmpo will win for that, a lot for that reason, is that the guys who vote don't like the way James Harden plays. It's not aesthetically pleasing. And you kind of want new stories. He won it. And so, Antetokounmpo's coming up and they love the narrative of a player. So I think Antetokounmpo will win it. But if I had to vote, my vote would go with slightly hard.
Well, extremely astute observation. I mean, they're just spot on. Once again, it's Anthony Barbarin, our man in the know when it comes to NBA. If you have a question for him, let us know, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com, or just hit us up on any of our Pop Culture Cosmos social media or Inside Sports as well. But the last thing I want to ask you, my friend, is Marvel related, because of Endgame is coming out the end of this month. Your favorite entity or movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how it ties into Avengers Endgame.
My favorite film in the universe is kind of hard to say. I don't know if I really have one, but my favorite character to tie into this, as far as the tie-in, and we were just talking about storylines with, how the voters love storylines. To me, the storyline that goes most into it that I love is Thor and his relationship as essentially the protector of Earth. And
should have gone for the head.
Yeah, exactly. And his need to not only avenge his brother, but stop Thanos and what he was doing, and he was inches away. In this failure, I think is a Virginia-like redemption story where he comes back and in this final end game and redeems himself and finds a way to, right the wrongs in his failures of the past. So that's my role. That's what I'm rolling with in Avengers Endgame in the Marvel Universe.
Well, that's actually very, very good point. I really like how you phrase that. And the fact is, it still remains to be seen what Chris Hemsworth's future is after Endgame. If he dies in Endgame or if he lives, how is his character going to succeed? Because his contract is up. So we'll see. That's how exactly the Thor character or persona per se is going to advance moving forward, or if it's going to advance at all. But you're right. Thor is going to be a key component of Avengers Endgame. And this time, if there is sort of time travel going back in that time in Wakanda at the end of Infinity War, I have a feeling I know he's going to target his Stormbreaker a little bit differently this time.
Right. And also, is this the end for Tony Stark? I mean,
and Captain America.
Tony Stark was the beginning. Iron Man was that initial film that started this entire thing. I think it was 2008. So, you know, you had all of these films. He's been in every Avengers film. He's been in most of the Marvel films coming up, and he's been that main figurehead. If you've watched throughout the series, he and Pepper Potts have constantly talked about him getting out and him living this regular life and not trying to be the superhero anymore. So is Endgame, is this the time where he, you know, finishes the job and hangs up the Iron Man power suits? That's something to watch as well.
Absolutely. And like I said, Captain America, all the original people involved in the first phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, their odds of survival are kind of shaky, and it's going to be very interesting to see. I know you and I are going to both be excited when we go check out Avengers Endgame later this month. Just some awesome thoughts as far as Thor and the whole 9 yards when it comes to what you were thinking about. It is our man again in the know when it comes to NBA and also pop culture. It's Anthony Barbarin. Like I said, if you have any questions, just hit us up on any of our social media and we'll be glad to pass it along. Up until draft time, my friend, it'll be another wild, crazy scenario again for the NBA playoffs. I know you and I will be hopefully chatting back and forth during the playoff season, either shaking our heads or whatnot. Hopefully not at more Lakers drama. Just hopefully not at more Lakers drama. That's all I hope.
Hey, I mean, the Sacramento is trying to upstage you guys.
Don't get me started on the newly minted Hall of Famer. One of my favorite players from the day, but even I could tell you, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. But yeah, he gets rewarded with a new contract. And what does he do? He fires a promising coach and fires a promising general manager or assistant general manager. After a season, which on his whiteboard, as I joked earlier, was 10 games more than what he himself had predicted for the season. So I guess that's a reward for doing a job well done.
This is why dysfunctional franchises stay dysfunctional.
This is true. I feel bad for the players because this is a team on the rise, and you know what? This could be a bad sign going forward for the Sacramento Kings, but there are some good signs going forward for a lot of other teams coming up in the NBA playoffs. And Anthony Barbarin, you're the man in the know. Just truly appreciate all your input and all your thoughts going forward for us right here at Inside Sports and also the Pop Culture Cosmos.